The Lost Kingdom of Thistlebrook. In a forgotten corner of the world, where the veil between reality and dreams is thin, lies the entrance to a kingdom long lost to time. Ivy-covered arches, relics of a bygone era, stand as silent sentinels at the edge of Thistlebrook, a forest rumored to be enchanted. Among the ancient oaks and towering pines, whispers of the strange and wondrous echo through the trees, alluring the brave or the foolish into its depths. Alice had always been fascinated by the legends of Thistlebrook. The villagers in the nearby town of Eldridge spoke of it in hushed tones, as if fearful that the mere mention of its name might summon its forgotten inhabitants. But Alice was not one to be frightened by old tales. The world outside her village was small, too ordinary for her restless spirit. She craved adventure, the thrill of discovering something no one else had seen. And so, on a crisp autumn evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she set out to uncover the mysteries of the Lost Kingdom. As she made her way through the winding paths of Thistlebrook, the air grew cooler, and the trees seemed to close in around her. The sounds of the forest rustling in the underbrush, the call of an owl were muted, as if the very earth was holding its breath. Alice pressed on, undeterred, her lantern casting a warm, flickering light that danced across the gnarled roots and fallen leaves. The path led her to an overgrown clearing, where the remains of an ancient stone archway stood. It was covered in thick ivy, its once grand design barely visible beneath the tangled green. Beyond the archway, a dark tunnel beckoned, its entrance framed by the faint glow of lanterns that hung from the surrounding trees like sentinels. As she approached, Alice noticed movement from the corner of her eye. She turned just in time to see a small, white-furred creature darting through the bushes. It was a rabbit, but not like any rabbits she had ever seen. It wore a finely tailored blue coat and waistcoat, its large, expressive eyes glancing nervously at the pocket watch it clutched in its paw. "Who are you?" Alice called out, her curiosity piqued. The rabbit paused, clearly startled, and turned to face her. "Who am I?" it repeated, as if the question puzzled it. "I am the Herald of Thistlebrook, of course. And I'm terribly late." "There's no time for introductions." Alice's eyes widened. "The Herald of Thistlebrook. Does that mean the kingdom is real?" "Of course, it's real," the rabbit replied, a note of impatience in its voice. "But it's no place for a human. You'd best turn back now, before it's too late." "I'm not turning back," Alice said firmly, stepping closer. "I came to find Thistlebrook, and I'm not leaving until I do." The rabbit sighed, glancing at its watch again. "Stubborn, aren't you? Very well, if you insist on coming, you must keep up. I don't have time to wait for stragglers." Without another word, the rabbit turned and bounded toward the tunnel. Alice followed, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. As she stepped beneath the archway, she felt an odd sensation wash over her, as if the world around her had shifted ever so slightly. The tunnel was dark, save for the soft glow of the lanterns that lined the walls. The air was thick with the scent of earth and moss, and Alice could hear the distant drip of water echoing through the passage. The rabbit moved swiftly, its feet making barely a sound on the stone floor. Alice struggled to keep up, her footsteps loud in comparison. "What is this place?" she asked, her voice hushed in the strange, echoing space. "The threshold," the rabbit replied without slowing. "It's the boundary between your world and ours. Once we cross it, there's no going back the way you came." Alice's grip tightened on her lantern. "And what lies beyond the threshold?" "A kingdom unlike any you've ever imagined," the rabbit said, a hint of pride creeping into its voice. "But it's not what it once was. Thistlebrook has changed, and not for the better. They emerged from the tunnel into a sprawling underground chamber, the likes of which Alice had never seen. The ceiling was high, supported by ancient stone columns, and the walls were adorned with intricate carvings that depicted scenes of a grand, flourishing kingdom. But the carvings were worn, cracked, as though time itself had tried to erase the memory of Thistlebrook. In the center of the chamber stood a grand, ornately decorated door, its surface covered in glowing runes that pulsed with a soft, ethereal light. The rabbit approached the door and pressed a paw against one of the runes. The door creaked open, revealing a landscape that took Alice's breath away. She stepped through the doorway, her eyes wide as she took in the sight before her. Thistlebrook was indeed a kingdom, but one far removed from the grand, flourishing place depicted in the carvings. The land was dark and twisted, as though a shadow had fallen over it and drained the life from its very soil. Once majestic trees were now gnarled and barren, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The sky was an eerie, swirling mix of indigo and violet, with patches of stormy clouds that seemed to be caught in an eternal struggle. In the distance, the spires of what must have been a grand castle now stood crooked and crumbling, a mere shadow of their former glory. Alice felt a shiver run down her spine. What happened here? The rabbit sighed, its ears drooping slightly. Thistlebrook was once a place of wonder and magic, ruled by a kind and wise queen. But that was long ago. Now, the kingdom is ruled by fear, and the magic that once brought life to this land has turned dark and malevolent. What caused it? Alice asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The rabbit hesitated, glancing around as if wary of being overheard. It was the queen's heart, it finally said. The queen possessed a heart of pure magic, a gift from the ancient spirits that kept the kingdom thriving. But something happened, no one knows exactly what, and the heart was corrupted. The queen vanished, and the kingdom began to wither. Alice stared at the distant castle, her mind racing. Is there any way to fix it? To restore the kingdom? The rabbit shook its head. Many have tried, but the darkness is strong, and the heart, it is hidden, deep within the heart of the castle. Few who have sought it have ever returned. Alice's eyes narrowed with determination. I have to try. If there's even a chance of saving Thistlebrook, I can't just walk away. The rabbit looked at her, a mixture of surprise and admiration in its eyes. You're braver than most, it said. But bravery alone won't be enough. You'll need help if you're to stand any chance of finding the Queen's heart. Where do I start? Alice asked, ready for whatever challenge lay ahead. The rabbit pondered for a moment before nodding to itself. Follow me, it said. There's someone you need to meet. They set off across the darkened landscape, the rabbit leading the way through the twisted trees and along a path that wound its way toward the distant castle. The air grew colder as they approached, and Alice couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Shadows moved in the corners of her vision, but when she turned to look, there was nothing there. After what felt like hours of walking, they arrived at a small, dilapidated cottage nestled at the edge of a murky swamp. The roof sagged, and the windows were cracked and grimy, but the light that flickered from within suggested that someone still lived there. The rabbit hopped up to the door and knocked 3 times with a small, velvet-covered paw. The door creaked open, revealing a hunched figure silhouetted against the dim light of the interior. The figure stepped forward, revealing a tall, slender man with skin as pale as moonlight and eyes that glowed a soft amber. Alice, this is Merrick, the rabbit said. He's a sorcerer, one of the last of his kind in Thistlebrook. If anyone can help you, it's him. Merrick studied Alice with an intense gaze that seemed to see right through her. "So, you're the one who's come to save Thistlebrook," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "I can see the fire in your spirit. But fire alone won't protect you from the darkness that dwells in the castle." "I'm willing to do whatever it takes," Alice replied, meeting his gaze with a steady determination. Merrick nodded slowly. "Very well. But know this: Thistlebrook is not what it once was. The darkness has tainted the land, and the creatures that dwell here are no longer as they seem. You will face many trials, and not all of them will be of flesh and blood." He turned and gestured for them to enter the cottage. Inside, the space was cramped and cluttered with an assortment of strange objects: jars filled with glowing liquids, books with pages that seemed to shift and move on their own, and an assortment of charms and talismans hanging from the ceiling. A small fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the room. Merrick reached up to one of the shelves and pulled down a small, intricately carved box. He opened it to reveal a shimmering, golden key that seemed to pulse with an inner light. "This is the key of starlight," Merrick explained, holding it out to Alice. "It will open the door to the Queen's chamber, where the heart is kept. But be warned, the journey there will not be easy. The castle is alive with dark magic, and it will do everything in its power to stop you." Alice took the key, feeling its warmth in her palm. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "I won't let the darkness win." Merrick gave her a small, sad smile. "May the spirits guide you, Alice. And remember, you are not alone. There are still those in Thistlebrook who wish to see the kingdom restored. Seek them out, and they will aid you in your quest." With the key in hand and a renewed sense of purpose, Alice turned to leave the cottage. The rabbit, who had been watching the exchange in silence, hopped to her side, ready to continue the journey. As they made their way back to the path leading to the castle, Alice couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The air grew heavier with each step, and the shadows around them seemed to grow longer, darker. But she pushed those feelings aside, focusing on the task ahead. The castle loomed ever closer, its jagged spires piercing the turbulent sky. The gates, once grand and imposing, now stood ajar, rusted and covered in creeping vines. Beyond them, the courtyard was overgrown with thorny brambles and dark, twisted trees that seemed to sway in a non-existent wind. Alice stepped cautiously through the gates, her lantern casting long shadows across the ground. The rabbit stayed close to her side, its usual nervous energy now replaced by a quiet determination. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the only sound was the soft crunch of Alice's boots on the gravel path. As they approached the castle's entrance, the massive doors creaked open on their own, revealing a grand hall that was once the heart of the kingdom. The floor was made of black and white tiles, now cracked and faded, and the walls were lined with tattered banners bearing the crest of the lost queen. A grand staircase spiraled upward, leading to the upper levels of the castle. "This is where we part ways," the rabbit said, looking up at Alice with a serious expression. "I cannot go any further. The castle, it's not safe for me." Alice nodded, understanding the rabbit's reluctance. "Thank you for your help," she said sincerely. "I'll find the Queen's heart, and I'll restore Thistlebrook." The rabbit gave her a small nod, its eyes filled with a mix of hope and sorrow. "Be careful, Alice. The darkness here is strong. Trust in yourself, and in the light." With that, the rabbit turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Alice to face the castle alone. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead, and began to climb the staircase. The air grew colder as she ascended, and the light from her lantern seemed to dim, as if being swallowed by the darkness that clung to the walls. As she reached the top of the stairs, She found herself standing before a set of massive double doors, intricately carved with symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light. Alice knew, instinctively, that this was the door to the Queen's chamber. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the key of starlight, its golden surface shimmering in the darkness. With a steady hand, she inserted the key into the lock and turned it. The doors swung open silently, revealing a vast, circular chamber bathed in an eerie, pale light. At the center of the room, suspended in midair by tendrils of dark energy, was the Queen's heart, a large, pulsating crystal that glowed with a sickly, greenish light. The once beautiful artifact was now twisted and corrupted, its surface marred by dark veins that pulsed with malevolent energy. Alice stepped into the chamber, her heart pounding. The air was thick with a palpable sense of dread, and the shadows seemed to move of their own accord, shifting and writhing as if alive. She knew she had to act quickly. The longer she stayed, the more the darkness would try to consume her. She approached the heart cautiously, reaching out with the key of starlight. As the key drew closer to the heart, the dark tendrils reacted violently, lashing out at her with a force that sent her stumbling backward. She barely managed to keep her grip on the key as she regained her footing, her mind racing for a solution. Suddenly, she remembered Merrick's words, "You are not alone." Alice closed her eyes, focusing on the warmth of the key in her hand, and began to channel her thoughts, calling out to the spirits of Thistlebrook. She felt a surge of energy within her, a light that pushed back against the encroaching darkness. The key began to glow brighter, its golden light intensifying until it filled the entire chamber. The dark tendrils recoiled, hissing and writhing as the light touched them. Alice took a deep breath and stepped forward once more, holding the key out toward the heart. This time, the light from the key enveloped the heart, pushing back the darkness that had taken hold of it. With a final, desperate cry, the darkness shattered, dissipating into the air like smoke. The heart, now freed from its corruption, glowed with a brilliant, pure light that filled the chamber with warmth and hope. Alice watched in awe as the crystal began to heal, its surface smoothing out, the dark veins fading away. The tendrils of energy that had held the heart aloft gently lowered it into Alice's outstretched hands. She could feel the magic within it, strong and pure, a force of life and light that pulsed in rhythm with her own heartbeat. As she cradled the heart, the chamber around her began to change. The cold, oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a warmth that spread through the castle. The walls repaired themselves, the banners restored to their former glory, and the light that had dimmed throughout Thistlebrook began to return, pushing back the shadows that had held the kingdom in darkness for so long. Alice knew that the heart needed to be returned to its rightful place at the center of the kingdom, where its magic could once again flow through the land. With the key of starlight still in hand, she left the Queen's chamber, making her way back down the grand staircase. As she stepped out into the courtyard, she was greeted by a sight that brought tears to her eyes. The once darkened sky was now a brilliant shade of blue, with the golden light of the sun breaking through the clouds. The trees that had been twisted and barren were now lush and green, their branches heavy with leaves. Flowers bloomed along the path, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of life returning to the land. In the distance, the people of Thistlebrook began to emerge from their homes, their faces filled with wonder as they beheld the restoration of their kingdom. Alice could see Merrick standing at the edge of the crowd, a proud smile on his face. She approached the center of the courtyard, where a grand pedestal stood, a place where the Queen's heart had once rested. Alice carefully placed the heart upon the pedestal, and as she did, the light within it spread out across the land, sealing the restoration of Thistlebrook. The kingdom, once lost to darkness, had been reborn. As the people gathered around her, Alice felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had done what she had set out to do. She had saved Thistlebrook. And as the villagers cheered and celebrated, she knew that her journey had been worth every step. The rabbit appeared at her side, looking up at her with a wide grin. "You did it," it said, its voice filled with awe. Alice smiled down at the rabbit, her heart swelling with pride. "We did it," she corrected. The rabbit chuckled, nodding in agreement. "Yes, we did." As the light of the restored kingdom bathed the land in warmth and hope, Alice knew that Thistlebrook would thrive once more. The lost kingdom had been found, its heart restored, and with it, the promise of a bright future. And so, the legends of Thistlebrook would continue, not as a tale of darkness and despair, but as a story of hope, courage, and the enduring power of light.